Welcome to the Multifamily 5, where industry experts provide raw information about how they're achieving success in the current market conditions. And now, your host, Dallas-based real estate broker, Mark Allen.
And welcome to the Multifamily 5. Excited today to connect with GREA's very own Stuart Page. Stuart, how's it going?
Great, Mark. Thanks for having me today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome. Glad to have you. So let's get going. And today we're going to talk a little bit about equity. Stuart Page helped stood our equity platform up fairly recently. And so maybe we can go through some case studies today, some common concerns, and maybe just educate the group on, appetite for equity in today's environment. So Stuart, with that, can you tell us a little bit about your background and experience and what you're currently focused on?
Absolutely. Former investment banker, private equity professional, went to undergrad here in Dallas, Texas at UNT, and then left in 2007 at the height of the financial crisis. Perfect timing to go be an investment banker in Los Angeles. It was a great experience working a lot in private placements and M&A out there before moving over to a private equity shop and working on LBOs. Finished my master's degree out there at Pepperdine before relocating back to DFW in 2017. To get into the multifamily value add space.
Awesome. And then let's talk a little bit, what's your current focus, and you've been placing equity for how long, and maybe talk a little bit about what your focus is today.
Yeah. So spent the better part of my career actually placing equity for a variety of different companies, mostly real estate developers throughout the years in investment banking. And so it's kind of opportunistic to be here with GREA now. Utilizing the relationships that we have with family offices, high net worth individuals, and private equity, and helping sponsors really just kind of navigate that world right now, finding the best ways to build their capital stack.
Very good. So what's the process when a sponsor decides to work with you on a deal that they're looking to capitalize?
So the best way to get involved is to hopefully have some kind of deal already in your hopper that you've underwritten, that you at least feel confident that you're going to be in the best and final. At that point, it makes sense to reach out to us and start getting involved with, talking to equity groups, looking at if pref equity might be an option. But about the time that you have a deal ready to go and you've already made an offer is a good time to go ahead and get engaged.
Okay. And then, I think a common question just in some of the meetings that we've had is with regard to control provisions. I think the perception is that there's there's certain level of control that, various equity sources might have that really limit, the sponsor. And I think there's been, a lot of syndicators over time that have raised just kind of retail equity from limited partners that have shied away from taking preferred equity or other equity sources. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about control provisions and maybe help ease some of those concerns.
Yeah, great topic. It's certainly something that a lot of sponsors that I talk to have concerns over. A friend of a friend of a friend has always had, a bad experience of, a pref equity group or someone trying to take the deal over. What I'll say to that is, the pref equity term sheets and their control provisions are going to be no different than what your lender is going to put in place. At the end of the day, these groups are more often than not money managers. They've raised funds, whatever it may be. And so they are, fiduciaries to their investors. And so it's simply, they need to be able to step in if the deal is completely needs to be rescued at that point. And so more often than not, you're going to find them to be great partners. They want to be successful in the deal just as well as you do. So if you do well, they do well. But they do need to have those provisions in place again in the event that things are spiraling out of control. But again, it's no different than the terms that you have within your lender docs.
Yeah. And it seems like also from our conversations that, not all equity groups are equal. Some are much more flexible on timeline and some might not be, such as a family office may be a little more flexible on their whole period. Whereas another private equity company may have, hey, we've got a 5-year horizon for our partners. So
yeah. So there's various kinds of pref equity. You've got your hard pref equity where it may be a PE fund that's raised capital and told their investors it's a 5 to 7 year investment and harvest timeline. And so therefore they will need to probably exit the deal within a certain time frame. Whereas a family office they are going to want to hold the asset to maximize as much value as they can. So if it's not the right time to sell and it's year 5, they're going to be more favorable to hold on and maximize the value. The other type of pref equity is going to be participating pref, and they may allow you to fully accrue any kind of payments and then participate in the back end once it's all said and done. So a variety of different pref equity groups out there. What I will say is it's a great tool, especially with where we're at in the market right now, between kind of the bid-ask spread between buyers and sellers, and being able to kind of bridge that gap with lower leverage opportunities. So it's a great tool to utilize at this point to be able to kind of close that gap and remain competitive. So,
yeah. I have clients, and there's probably listeners who, aren't as sophisticated when it comes to their, financial modeling. They may run just a back of the napkin, and they're more basis driven. They know they can make money, at a certain price point based on today's debt market. I have some that obviously that are newer. Maybe they've exited, a deal or two and have a little bit of experience, but maybe their underwriting model doesn't include preferred equity or any mezzanine debt or whatever the case may be. I guess what would your recommendation? You talked a little bit about the process working with a sponsor, but is there any way you could potentially help there?
Yeah. So once you have an opportunity underwritten, that's about the time that we can go ahead and get involved. We can walk through the underwriting with the sponsor. We can see if pref equity actually even makes sense for the deal, but help them to bake that into their capital stack. Again, looking through the various terms and the cash flows of it, and making sure that it's aligned with not only the sponsor's needs, but also the LPs that sit behind the pref equity. So happy to get involved and walk them through step by step on how that would work.
Okay. Yeah. And then you were talking a little bit about the kind of target returns that, I guess pref equity or equity sources are looking for today. I know that's changed a little bit, from last year, maybe even earlier this year. So it's just general underwriting guidelines. What are they looking for today as far as returns go?
Sure. So every group's got a different strike zone. I would say, again, most pref equity groups are going to be aiming for a 6 to 8% current pay, with a 13 to 15% all in, usually with a redemption between 3 to 5 years, 1% origination fee. It does vary. There are groups that will allow you to fully accrue with a higher, all-in rate, maybe of a 16 at the end. But every group's got a different strike zone. And so if you're able to find a group that'll allow you to do accrue or even 8% maybe pari passu along with your LPs, that'll allow for the LPs to be able to participate in that cash flow over the whole period, which is really nice.
Yeah. I think, there's what a lot of sponsors need to understand is preferred equity, mezzanine debt. There's a lot of similarities between the two, but, really preferred equity is an important piece of the capital stack, or can be, and needs to be looked at more like debt. Yeah,
absolutely. Again, it solves for that higher LTV that you're trying to get back to in a market where lenders are pulling back, LTVs dropping, rates are increasing, things like that. On a proportion, average to your total capital stack, they're taking a smaller piece. And again, they're not getting as high as the back end participation. So it ends up averaging out and being more accretive to your LPs in the long run.
Yeah. Okay. What about just appetite in general for equity groups? Has that changed at all as far as demand goes? Or is there more demand, less demand? How's that changed just in the last, 6 to 9 months?
Yeah, the demand is still there, especially for DFW and Sunbelt multifamily. The appetite's still there. I think everyone's in sort of a wait and see mode right now with what the Fed's going to do, but the capital's already out there. It's already been raised, or it's on the sidelines and looking for places to go. And so I think for DFW, Austin, we're still in, one of the best pockets of the country for multifamily. And so there's still an appetite for those opportunities. You may just need to get creative with your hold periods, things like that. But the equity's there, and it's looking for opportunity.
Yeah. I know probably a potential concern is new equity relationships. And it's like, I'm imagining it could be a little bit tougher when you've got non-refundable earnest money. Your back's against the wall with a timeline, and you're being introduced to new equity relationships. I guess, is there anything you can do to protect against that?
So there are ways to protect yourself as a sponsor by including breakup clauses, et cetera, within these equity agreements. And typically you're going to want to tie that to whatever your earnest money is so that your downside's protected there. But more often than not, these groups they're looking for pipelines of opportunities. So they want to get a deal done with you, and they're going to try their best to get it over the finish line. So,
yeah. And I imagine a good way to start a relationship with an equity group is, maybe you've syndicated through common limited partners or retail equity, and maybe a good avenue is a recapitalization. I don't know if you want to touch on that at all.
So recaps right now are actually coming up more and more. I think there's a lot of groups out there who have investors that are looking to exit where the sponsors may want to stay in. So there's quite a bit of equity out there that's looking to come in and recap opportunities. And so I think if you've got a good asset and it's the right time to take out your partners and recap, then there's private equity groups that would love to come in.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. And I'm not sure if you hit on it, but as far as decision timelines, what are you seeing from presenting a deal to commitment?
Typical timeline is going to be roughly 60 days. I would say that that might be extended a little bit right now, but around 60 days, any private equity group or family office can dig in and get you an answer before then. In which again, I know that that's a tight timeline once you go under contract, but the more that you're speaking with these groups, the more they get to know you as a sponsor, that timeline becomes shorter and shorter.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thanks, Stuart. I think you answered some common question, also gave us a pretty good picture of the current landscape. What's the best way for listeners to reach out, learn more about, how to work with you?
So you can contact me at stuart.page@grea.com. That's stuart.page@grea.com, or contact me on my cell at 512-963-7243.
Awesome. Again, Stuart, thanks for your time today. Look forward to reconnecting soon.
Likewise. Take care, Mark.